Just after midnight, January 1957, detectives knocked on a door in Waterbury, Connecticut, and a heavy-set man opened it. He was in pajamas, smiling. He asked politely if he could go upstairs and get dressed first. He came back down in a double-breasted suit, buttoned, exactly what a psychiatrist had predicted in print weeks before. That psychiatrist had never met him, never seen his face. He had only read the man's letters. So how do you get from a stack of angry letters to the buttons on a stranger's jacket? For 16 years, New York City had hunted a man who left almost nothing behind him. 33 devices: Grand Central, Penn Station, Radio City Music Hall, the public library, phone booths, movie seats. 22 of them went off. 15 people were hurt. Nobody died, and that was mostly luck. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no suspect. Just letters, block. Printed, ruler straight, signed with 2 initials, FP. To understand the suit, you have to go back to a boiler room, 26 years earlier. September 5, 1931. A generating plant on the East River. A wiper named George Metesky is on shift. A boiler backfires. A wall of hot gas knocks him flat and fills his lungs. He walks home, he coughs, the coughing doesn't stop, pneumonia comes first and then tuberculosis. He files for workers' compensation. The claim is denied, filed too late, past the legal deadline. Whether that was fair barely matters now. What matters is what he did with the silence afterward. He wrote letters. To the company, the mayor, the newspapers, hundreds of them over 9 years. Nobody wrote back. That's the part he couldn't get past, not the injury, the not answering. You know a small version of this. A message you sent, marked read, and never answered. Now stretch it across a decade, while you're sick, out of work, living off your sister's paychecks. On November 16, 1940, a wooden toolbox appeared on a windowsill at the power company's building. Inside, a short length of pipe packed with powder and a note, hand-printed in careful capitals. Con Edison crooks, this is for you. He wanted them to know exactly who it came from. Here's the strange part. It never went off. And investigators came to believe that was deliberate. A working device that doesn't fire isn't a failure. It's a letter written in gunpowder. Then in December 1941, after a second unexploded device, police got a note that shut the case down. I'll make no more bomb units for the duration of the war, it said. My patriotic feelings have made me decide this. Later I'll bring the Con Edison to justice. Signed FP. And then he kept his word. 9.5 years, not one device. Think about that. He hated a company enough to build bombs, and loved his country enough to stop. That contradiction is the entire case. Hold on to it, a psychiatrist is going to build on it. On March 29, 1951, a device went off inside Grand Central Terminal. He was back. And the second campaign was nothing like the first. Bigger pipes, better powder, and human targets. He'd walk into a crowded movie theater with a small knife and a bomb under his coat. He'd sit down, slit the underside of the seat cushion, and slide the pipe up inside it. Then he'd stand, walk out, and leave the rest to whoever sat down after him. Radio City Music Hall, 1954, mid-screening. 4 people hurt. At first the audience thought a seat had collapsed. Penn Station. The Port Authority Terminal. The subway. The library. Phone booths scattered across Midtown Manhattan. Then December 2, 1956. The Paramount Theater in Brooklyn. 6 people injured, 2 of them seriously. That one broke the city's patience. The papers had a name for him now, the Mad Bomber. New York launched the biggest manhunt in its history, and had almost nothing to run it on. He wore gloves, used no return address, and every device was cleaner than the last. Thousands of tips led nowhere. So in December 1956, a police inspector named Howard Finney tried something the department had never tried. He carried the letters, the photographs, and the whole case file into a psychiatrist's office. Dr. James Brussel was a criminologist and a state mental health official. He wasn't a cop. Finney's question was simple and a little desperate. What kind of person writes these letters? What Brussel did next is now taught as the first criminal profile in American police work. He didn't guess. He reasoned backward from details, the way you read a stranger's kitchen while they're out. Start with the grudge. 16 years, one company, the same complaint, almost word for word, every time. That fixed, unbudging story is the shape of paranoia. And paranoia builds slowly, over decades. It usually takes hold around 35. Add 16 years of bombing. So, a man in his 50s. His phrasing was stiff and formal. Dastardly deeds. Nobody raised in New York writes that sentence. It read like careful English learned from a book, by someone born into an Eastern European family. Bombs and knives, Brussel argued, were old-world weapons, with a long history on that side of the Atlantic. The letters were postmarked in Westchester, roughly halfway between New York City and southern Connecticut. A man this careful wouldn't mail from home, he'd drive part of the way and post them in between. Connecticut's mill towns were full of Eastern European families. Bridgeport, Waterbury, that's where Brussels pointed. Then the physical description, and this is the shakiest part, so let's be honest about it. He leaned on a dated theory tying paranoia to a stocky, barrel-chested build. Call that one a coin flip. His sharper calls came from the letters themselves, which kept circling back to his chest, his lungs, an old injury. 16 years of writing, and not one mention of a wife, a child, or a friend. But the letters were fussy, laundered, almost prim. Someone was keeping that man's shirts pressed. So, unmarried, living with women who took care of him. Brussels guessed a sister, or an aunt. Then he added the line that made the profile famous, and made the detectives in the room laugh. When you catch him, and you will, he'll be wearing a double-breasted suit, buttoned. That wasn't a flourish. It fell straight out of everything he had already said. A man this precise doesn't dress loosely. His bombs were neat. His printing was neat. So was he. And in his head, he was still living in 1931. In 1931, that's how a proper man dressed. If that just changed what you think a hunch actually is, that's exactly what this channel is for. Stick around. Brussels had one more piece of advice, and it was the part everyone in the room hated. Publish it. Print the whole profile in the papers. Let him read what a stranger says he is. Police worried it would provoke him. Brussels argued a man this starved for attention couldn't look away. On Christmas Day 1956, the profile ran in the New York Times. The Journal American went further. The paper printed an open letter to FP, offering to hear his grievance if he'd explain it. The trap isn't clever, that's why it worked. It's just an invitation to finally be listened to. He wrote back. And in writing back he ran into a problem he had to solve. By then, every crank in New York was writing in, claiming to be the bomber. So he did what anybody does when they aren't believed. He got specific. He gave them the date. September 5, 1931. The day the boiler knocked him down. He described the injury, the denied claim, and his decision to take justice in my own hands. That was the case. Handed over voluntarily. Not as a boast, as proof he was telling the truth. Meanwhile, the power company had told police early on that employee files that old were long gone. They weren't. They sat in a records room, being read by a clerk named Alice Kelly. She wasn't a detective. She was working through old injury folders, looking for lung complaints and grudges. She'd been told to flag anything with words like injustice, or threats, or a claim that never died. Then she opened a folder for a former wiper, injured at the plant on September 5, 1931. Clipped inside were his own letters. One of them promised to take justice in my own hands. Same date. Same phrase, same company. The answer had been in a filing cabinet the entire time. 16 years of manhunt, ended by a woman reading paperwork that nobody had ever bothered to read. Late on January 21, 1957, detectives drove to a house on 4th Street in Waterbury, Connecticut. George Medesky answered the door, 53 years old, heavy-set, polite, not remotely surprised to see them. He lived there with his 2 older unmarried sisters, exactly as the profile had described him. They asked what FP stood for. He answered without hesitating, almost proudly. Fair play. They told him to get dressed. He went upstairs. The detectives waited down in the hall. He came back in a blue double-breasted suit, buttoned to the top. His shoes shined. He never stood trial. Doctors found him unfit, and he was sent to a hospital for the criminally insane. He went home to Waterbury in 1973, and died there in 1994. 15 people carried his injuries far longer. The detail he added to prove he was telling the truth is the detail that identified him. A profile narrowed the map, a newspaper opened the door, and a file clerk quietly closed it. Cases like this deserve to be remembered. Like and subscribe, so the next one isn't forgotten. Next time, a cipher mailed to a newspaper, and the schoolteacher who cracked it at her kitchen table. Take care.